The video that slaughtered my sister was the parting gift she left behind for me. If she'd known what would happen, she wouldn't have let me watch it. She definitely wouldn't have watched it herself. Amelia and I were close. There were just 2 years between us. My little sister was almost 20 when it happened. It feels unreal sometimes, and I often forget it's only been 5 weeks since she died. I don't know how much time I have before it happens to me. Amelia and I were inseparable. Imagine my index and middle fingers interlocking. That was us. Sure, siblings are supposed to fight at some point, especially the ones who claim to be best friends. But we never did, and it wasn't because we were anything special. We didn't fight because we needed each other. It's hard to explain, but it's like we were always meant to be like this. Maybe it had something to do with our deadbeat dad, who definitely drew us closer. But even after we left his house 2 years ago, we kept relying on each other. Our mom died giving birth to Amelia, and our family never let us forget that we were to blame. I'm skirting around the truth here, to be honest. The real reason for our bond is darker, more disturbing than anything I've just mentioned. Honestly, I don't even know if those awful circumstances had anything to do with it at all. The truth is, from childhood onward, Amelia and I had a problem with food. Was it genetics? Environment? I couldn't say for sure. But in the end, what does it really matter? The result is all that stays with you, right? We were never officially diagnosed with anything. Dad didn't believe in doctors. But I blame myself. I always have. As the older sister, I know I must have influenced Amelia. I've tried to stop her from copying me, but in the end, I think I've only made it worse. I told her to eat, but my actions spoke louder. It doesn't take a genius to figure out why she didn't listen. When we reached adulthood, things changed. Maybe too much. Amelia joined the same university I went to, and we ended up living together. We had 2 flatmates, nice girls who were vaguely aware of our issues. One day, last February, I came home from a lecture to find Amelia bouncing around her room, practically giddy. She said she had finally found a way to kill that craving. I don't remember all of it, just pieces. Her bloodshot eyes were all I could focus on. I told myself the daylight must have been playing tricks on me, but in the back of my mind, I knew I wasn't seeing things clearly. I'd learned over the years to never trust my eyes. And that would come back to haunt me. What sticks with me the most is her face. It wasn't just her eyes. It was her lips, trembling slightly, like she was on the verge of tears, even as she tried to giggle softly. I remember her talking about a TikTok video, some influencer's post that she said was responsible for her new glow. But when I searched for the account, it wasn't there. Being the typical older sister, I lectured her about how harmful that app was. I reminded her that it was only making things worse for both of us. After all, we had promised each other, time and again, that we were going to get better. It's never as easy as just saying it. "You don't get it, Flora," Amelia said, shaking her head. "I haven't used TikTok since this morning, and I swear I won't use it again." I snorted. "Well done. You're taking a 5-hour break. Let's not rush to brand you one of the off-grid girlies just yet. I haven't been on my phone at all since this morning," she whispered, eyes intense. That got my attention. "Okay, that's impressive. I can't even remember the last time you took a break that long. I'm pretty sure you're still on your phone while you sleep." "Exactly," she said, nodding. "But listen, it's this video." "I feel different, Flora," she insisted, her eyes glued to her computer screen. "She told us to put down our phones and follow a website link. So I went to the address, and that's how I found this downloadable file." Amelia sighed, clearly pleased with herself. "It could help you too, Flora." I only watch the video whenever I feel a craving for food, and it just goes away. That's when I finally frowned. It just goes away. Her hand hovered over the mouse as she said, "Let me show you." Without thinking, I reached out and grabbed her wrist, stopping her from clicking on the video. I wasn't sure why I reacted so strongly. I was basing my concern on her strange behavior and what I assumed was a malicious video file. Still, something felt deeply wrong. I told her I didn't want to watch it. "And I don't want you watching it again," I added. "In fact, I want you to delete it." I should have made sure she deleted it. Maybe I could have stopped everything right then, before it became an obsession. That evening, during dinner, I managed to eat half my soup, not bad for me. Amelia, on the other hand, didn't even touch her plate. My stomach, however, was growling in protest. "Amelia? Are you okay?" I asked. She didn't respond. Instead, she sat there, giggling softly to herself, the sound more breathy than amused. Tears, half joy, half torment, streaked down her cheeks. Without a word or even a glance my way, she picked up her untouched plate and went into the kitchen, then disappeared into her room. She didn't come out all night. But then, around 3 a.m., when I went to use the bathroom, I noticed a strange blue glow slipping from under Amelia's door. It unsettled me, especially considering how much she had always been someone who went to bed early, despite her struggles. In the weeks that followed, Amelia only seemed to get worse. Before the video, I'd managed to get us to at least eat something at breakfast and dinner, but now even that routine was shattered. My sister was growing noticeably weaker. Meanwhile, I started eating more. I forced myself to eat a full bowl of cereal each morning, hoping that if I ate enough, I could keep us from both spiraling. I wanted to be a role model for Amelia, hoping she'd copy me once more. But the video had a grip on her. She was watching it more than once a day, and hardly ever left her room. Every time she did, it was like a little piece of her stayed behind. There was always less of her afterwards. By September, after finishing my course, Amelia moved into a new house. I went home, hoping Dad could somehow get through to her. I should have known better. Let's just say that was a long shot. Eventually, I decided to pay her an unannounced visit. She really had stopped using social media, just texting me occasionally. But by December, the texts became fewer and farther between. After a full week without hearing from her, I figured showing up at her house was the only thing left to do. Her housemates looked unusually pale when I arrived, and the sight only made my anxiety worse as I asked them about Amelia's well-being. One girl said she didn't know much, as she spent most nights at her boyfriend's place. The other said she hadn't seen Amelia since the Tuesday before, 9 days earlier. The only sign of Amelia's presence was that ever-present blue light under her door. Ignoring their protests, I ran up the stairs. They didn't follow me. Didn't try to stop me. Looking back now, I think they were too scared to intervene. There's a lot I've realized in hindsight. Their shaky voices, their trembling faces. Surely, something as simple as an antisocial housemate wouldn't have terrified them that much. One girl's eyes were filled with tears. I think there were things they weren't telling me. Stumbling through the dark landing, the faint blue glow pulled me towards Amelia's room. It slipped out from under the door, casting a ghostly light across the floor. But I didn't shout for her. Didn't knock. I grabbed the door handle and shoved my shoulder into it, slamming the door open. But it was already unlocked, and I stumbled right into the room. I found myself in a space with drawn curtains, a room that seemed to swallow the light. It was almost completely dark, except for the blinding blue from Amelia's monitor. The screen didn't light up much, just the carpet and the chair where my sister sat. She was sitting there, her head resting against the desk. My sister. But not really. My heart pounded in my chest, and my ears rang. I must have screamed, right? I must have screamed when I saw her, her frail, withered body, skin barely hanging onto her skeletal frame. That wasn't the thing that truly terrified me, though. No, it wasn't that. What froze me, what sent that icy dread through my veins, was the sight of her face. Her lower face, what was left of it, had decayed enough to reveal her skull, but her lips, they were still there. She died with a smile on her face. I might have been haunted by that, if not for the far heavier terror pulling my gaze. It was that terror that pushed me to write this, that made me do this now. A video was looping on Amelia's screen. I know you're dying to know what I saw. I wish I could tell you, but it wouldn't matter. You'd never understand unless you saw it yourself. It's more than just a video. More than a simple arrangement of black and blue pixels crafted perfectly to bring a grin to your face. To strip the weight from your body. I don't know who made it or what it is, but it's not natural. It doesn't belong in this world. I tried to look away, but I couldn't. Or maybe I didn't want to. I became completely detached from everything around me. Detached from the world. Detached from my senses. Detached from the screams of Amelia's housemates. Detached from the paramedics who pulled me away from her body. But I wasn't detached from fear. That stayed with me. It's still with me, no matter how wide I smile at my own reflection. Just like my sister, I wear that same smile now. I still release that breathy, quiet laugh, even though I don't want to. That's why I'm so afraid. I don't know what's happening inside me. The worst part? I'm detached, above all else, from hunger. My buddies and I have always been drawn to the woods. It all started with just me and my friend Ryan, heading out to make a few small bonfires and coming home late, smelling like nothing but wood smoke. We started doing this back when we were freshmen in high school, and somehow, it just stuck with us as we got older. Over time, other friends started tagging along too. Before we knew it, our weekends were spent camping out in this secluded patch of woods Ryan and I had stumbled upon when we were barely old enough to be called teenagers. It was actually my discovery. I'd found a small clearing about 1.5 miles into the woods. We ended up calling it Willow Grove, though it didn't have an official name. The first time I went out there, I saw a bunch of willow trees surrounding the clearing, so I figured it seemed like a fitting name. The spot was like a natural sanctuary, surrounded by trees with a trail leading in, crossing over a river where a bunch of large stones formed a natural bridge. Another path led out along a cliffside that followed the river's edge. We'd set up makeshift camps, light up bonfires, and sometimes even tried our hand at fishing. The woods had this magic to them, like a secret world where time slowed down, and the chaos of the world just disappeared. It felt like we were standing in a place where our ancestors might have walked. There was something ancient and powerful about it, something that spoke to the deep, primal part of us. Maybe that's why we kept coming back, or maybe it was just the bond we shared, and how this place tied it all together. Whatever it was, Willow Grove was special to us. By the time we hit our early 20s, we decided to make a trip for an overnight campout. We didn't get out there nearly as much as we used to, thanks to work and life's endless demands, but somehow, 6 of us managed to carve out the time to hike in and spend the night. Ryan and I sold the idea to the rest of the group, and it didn't take much convincing. My guess is they were all just craving the peace and isolation that the woods always offered. The first person I called after chatting with Ryan was Jessie. I had a thing for her, and I figured this might be my chance to make something happen. So, I was pretty pumped when she said she was in. My excitement dropped a little when she mentioned she'd be bringing her friend Maddie along, though. It wasn't that I didn't like Maddie, but every time I worked up the nerve to tell Jessie how I felt, Maddie was always there, pulling her away before I could say a word. I later found out Ryan had called our buddy Chris and his girlfriend Sarah to join. I was stoked when I heard Chris would be there. He was the third C, after all. We called him that because Ryan and I were both C names. Caleb, Ryan, and Chris. The three CS. We made the drive up Friday night. The spring air was perfect, neither too hot nor too cold, and the sky was clear, so we could see the full glory of the moon and stars. Honestly, I couldn't have asked for a better evening to return to Willow Grove. I was in the car with Ryan, rolling a joint for us to smoke on the way up, when we spotted Chris and Sarah trailing behind us on the road. As Chris pulled up next to us, I leaned over and, without thinking, dropped my pants and stuck my butt out the window. When I heard his horn blaring like crazy, I knew he'd seen me and quickly sat back down. "You know he's got Sarah with him, right?" Ryan said, giving me a hard time. "Hey, if she's sticking around, she's gotta learn what we're all about. If she's cool, she'll think it's funny," I said, lighting the joint and passing it over to Ryan. "You're not wrong," he mumbled, taking a hit. "But maybe we should ease her into it. You know, instead of throwing her into the deep end right away with all our weirdness." "Nah," I said with a grin. "It's like jumping into a cold lake. You just dive in and hope you don't freeze." We were still laughing about it as we pulled into the empty field by the road, where everyone else had already parked their cars. From there, we'd head into the woods. Rachel and Maddie were already parked by the field, chatting while Maddie leaned against the back of her old Jeep, puffing on a cigarette. Jessie smiled and waved as we pulled up, her long brown hair swaying back and forth with every motion of her hand. Maddie, on the other hand, didn't seem to care at all, with her short blonde hair and a look that was totally indifferent to our arrival. We parked, and Ryan popped the trunk to grab the case of cheap beer he'd brought along. Meanwhile, I grabbed the heavy-duty flashlight that was lying on the floorboard in front of me. "Hey, we've got a full moon tonight," Chris said, glancing up at the sky. "I thought you saw a full moon earlier, genius," I teased, making both him and Ryan laugh. "More like a half moon. You looked like you had two pale pancakes where your ass should be." Rachel's voice came from the other side of Chris's car as she stepped out, cracking us all up. Chris had really hit the jackpot with Rachel. She was a stunning brunette, with bright blue eyes and a warm smile that made her instantly likable. I held my arms out, turning toward Ryan with a grin. "Told you, man!" I shouted. A few seconds later, I heard the sound of footsteps crashing through the underbrush, followed by Mark's voice. "Mason!" he called. "Down here!" I shouted back. Suddenly, I was blinded by the beam of a flashlight, and I could see my leg, bent in an unnatural way, already swelling up badly. "Stay put! I'm going to get help!" Mark shouted from above. "Damn it, there's no signal out here," Martin muttered. "You'll have to head back to the cars. That's the closest place you're going to get a signal," I called up. "Don't worry, Mason, I'll take care of it," Mark reassured me. "Everyone stay here with Mason. I'll be back as quick as I can with some help." At that moment, I wasn't scared. I was just in a ton of pain. I wanted to cry from how badly it hurt, but I was aware that Jessie was somewhere nearby, and I didn't want her to see me falling apart. "Hey, someone throw me a beer!" I called up to the group on the ridge. A moment later, a can of beer landed in the mud beside me. I rinsed it off in the river, cracked it open with a satisfying hiss, and took a long gulp of the cold, carbonated drink. "Thank God!" I thought I was going to be sober there for a second. I shouted up to them, earning some laughs from the group. Crisis averted! I groaned in pain and rolled onto my back, using my good leg to push myself up out of the water until my back was against the dirt wall behind me. I'd toss you a joint, but it'd just get soaked, Rachel called down. It's okay, I'm still pretty high, I said, trying to joke through the pain. I thought I heard Jesse out here earlier. I've definitely been smoking too much. You must have been stoned. Jesse laughed from above. I was with Maddie the whole time. I took another sip of beer, trying to ignore the agonizing throbbing in my leg. The swelling was so bad I could feel it stretching my pant leg. In the silence that followed, the woods suddenly seemed to come alive with the sounds of mockingbirds. It was so loud I thought I heard someone speak up above, but I couldn't make out the words over the sudden burst of bird calls. What? I shouted up. I said, there's a ton of mockingbirds all of a sudden. Martin's voice came back down. I stopped and listened as the birds' mating calls echoed through the trees for several minutes before dying down. That was weird, I called up to them. There was no response. Guys, you still there? Yeah, we're here. Just hang in there. Mark should be back soon. We waited in silence for what felt like forever. It felt like an eternity, the pain never letting up. I couldn't stop thinking about how long it had been, so I shouted out again, not so much to check if they were still there, but more to distract myself from the agony. Hey, you guys didn't bail on me, did you? It's a mockingbird, I heard Jesse say. It's a bunch of them. Is Mark back yet? Silence. Hey, can you hear me? You must have been stoned. Jesse laughed. Yeah, I must have been, but it's wearing off. Can someone check to see what's taking Mark so long? I'll be back soon, Martin replied, his voice flat. I could tell he was probably worried, so I tried to reassure him. Don't worry, Martin. My flat ass broke my fall. No laughter came. They were probably starting to get concerned. I pulled my jacket tighter around me as the cold mud sapped the warmth from my body. It wasn't all bad, though. While it was making me shiver, it was also helping cool down my swollen leg. Don't worry, Mason. Mark will be back soon, Maddie's voice said, sounding more concerned than I expected. I was a little surprised to hear Maddie sounding so comforting, considering I'd always thought she lacked any real empathy. I'm not that worried, so you shouldn't be either, I told her. Why do you call it Mockingbird Wood? Jessie asked out of nowhere. I figured she was just trying to keep me talking, to keep me from slipping into shock or something. I felt embarrassed, but I answered anyway. Like I said earlier, I named it after the mockingbird I played with the first time I came here. Suddenly, there was a thump in the mud beside me, and I turned to see another beer half buried in the dirt. Thanks, I shouted, grabbing the beer and finishing off the rest of the one I'd been holding. The alcohol helped dull the pain a little, so I figured a second one couldn't hurt. Seriously, where the hell are Mark and Martin? I asked, starting to feel antsy. It's a mockingbird, Jessie said again. Why do you keep saying that? I asked, trying to sound polite but hiding the frustration creeping up in my voice. Before she could respond, I heard Rachel's voice. I get my taste from my dad. I fell silent. Something felt wrong, but I couldn't put my finger on it. I shook my head, wondering if maybe I was just concussed. Guys, maybe I'm just messed up, but you're all acting kind of strange. I'd toss you a joint too, but it'd just get wet, Rachel said, as if that was somehow helpful. What? I asked, totally confused. Sorry, just trying to think of ways to help, Rachel replied quickly. I'm not sure how that helps, I muttered, feeling more drunk than I cared to admit. It's a mockingbird, Jesse said, as if that explained anything. I was starting to feel genuinely creeped out. I pulled out my phone, planning to use its light to look around, but it either wasn't working or was dead. What the hell is taking Mark and Martin so long? One of them should have come back by now. Don't worry, Mason, I heard Mark's voice suddenly. Oh, thank God, I was getting worried there for a second. I laughed, relieved. Everyone stay here. I'll be back with some help. Mark's voice echoed. What the hell, Mark? I thought you already went to get help? I asked, confused and a little panicked. It's a mockingbird, Jessie said, her tone unwavering. What the hell is going on? I shouted, my nerves starting to crack. It's okay. Maddie's voice came from behind me, freezing my blood. Her voice wasn't coming from above me anymore. It was coming from the other side of the riverbank, in the dark. Maddie, how did you get down here? It's a mockingbird. Jessie's voice responded from the same place. I yelped in pain as I tried to scramble to my feet, but failed miserably. There was no way Jessie could have gotten down here that fast. Stay the hell away from me, I shouted, panicking. Don't worry, Mason, I heard Mark's voice again. You're not Mark, I yelled, terrified, at the patch of dark woods across the river. Remember that time we camped here during the snowstorm? Not Martin asked, his voice completely wrong. Yeah, and we hotboxed it, Not Mark added, almost gleefully. Help! Get away from me! I screamed, hurling my half-finished beer can as hard as I could in the direction of the voices. Another thump in the mud, and another beer can landed beside me. Stop messing with me, damn it! I screamed, my voice cracking with frustration. It's a mockingbird, not Jessie shouted from across the river. I tried to get to my feet again, but all I managed to do was push myself halfway up the dirt wall behind me before sliding right back down. The trees above erupted into the deafening chorus of mockingbird calls again, drowning out everything else around me. I caught some movement in the shadows across the river and, in a panic, threw the unopened beer can in that direction. I heard it clang heavily as it hit something. Then, a roar of anger pierced through the birdsong, which immediately fell silent. It's a mockingbird! Jessie's voice repeated again, cold and unmoving. Yeah, I get it. It's a damn mockingbird. Help me! Anyone! I shouted into the stillness of the woods. The minutes dragged on, feeling like hours. I had no idea how long I'd been stuck down there at this point. I tried standing for a third time, finally managing to get my good leg underneath me. But the question was, where the hell was I supposed to go? The river was shallow enough that I could wade across it, but I definitely didn't want to be on the other side with whatever was lurking over there. I couldn't climb up the sheer cliff behind me either. My only option left was following the river. I waded into the freezing water, the cold biting at my skin, and heard something stir in the woods on the other side as I moved. I'll be back as fast as I can with help. Mark's voice echoed from the shadows across the river. It's a mockingbird. Jessie's voice came from above me again. I'm coming back with a gun. How's that for help, you assholes? I yelled into the dark, my voice swallowed by the vast, indifferent forest. Each step I took through the water made me wince in pain, my injured leg dragging behind me. It was excruciating, but I pressed on, gasping with each painful movement. In some spots, the river came up to my neck, and I feared I might have to swim, my leg making it impossible to keep me afloat. Thankfully, it didn't get any deeper than that. At one point, the muddy riverbed sucked my shoe down so deep I couldn't get it back. My leg didn't have the strength to pull it free, so I slipped it off and kept moving forward barefoot. Help! A voice suddenly cried out. I froze, realizing that the voice was my own, echoing back at me. Whatever was stalking me was staying right by my side, keeping pace along the riverbank. It's a mockingbird! Jessie's voice came again from above. You must have been stoned, came Jessie's voice from across the river. I didn't respond. I just kept pushing forward, wondering what I'd do when I reached the rocks we'd used as a bridge. At that point, I'd have to cross to get back on solid ground, but with my leg in the shape it was, I wasn't sure I'd make it. It's a mockingbird, 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 not Jessie's voice called from the bank. I pushed on again, feeling my hand brush against one of the large rocks in the river. In the moonlight, I could see the trail on either side of me, bathed in silver. I leaned back, trying to get as close to the water as possible, and reached down, padding along the riverbed until I felt the hard edges of a stone the size of my fist. As quietly as I could, I lifted it and tossed it as far as I could into the river. The splash echoed loudly, and the entire woods exploded into birdsong again. I could make out something moving quickly toward the spot where the stone had landed, leaving the bank eerily still. It's a mockingbird! I heard from further down the river. Realizing I wasn't going to get a better shot, I pulled myself from the water as quietly as I could and began limping toward the edge of the woods. I tried to be as quiet as possible, but with my leg in its current state, it was slow going. I gritted my teeth and did my best not to groan in pain as I hobbled forward. I had been hobbling for what felt like forever when I heard a voice from behind me, coming from a little ways back. Don't worry, Mason! I'll be as fast as I can, Mark's voice called out. I pushed myself to hobble faster, trying to keep quiet despite the pain. It's a mockingbird, I heard the fake Jessie say, her voice much closer now. I switched to hopping on my good leg, each painful movement forcing me forward despite my body screaming for rest. The uneven ground nearly knocked me off balance with every step, but I kept going. Finally, I saw a beam of light ahead, and for a split second, I felt a flicker of hope. That hope died when I reached it. It was Mark's flashlight, lying on the forest floor, its beam illuminating nothing. I picked it up, and just as I did, I felt something wet drop onto my neck. I looked up, and what I saw made my stomach turn. Mark's body, mangled beyond recognition, was hanging from the trees above. His limbs were twisted in unnatural angles, his face half torn off. I would have screamed if I wasn't paralyzed with fear. Stay there! I heard Mark's voice again, louder now, closer behind me. Thinking quickly, I threw the flashlight as hard as I could into the woods to my left. Then I resumed my painful hopping, moving as quickly as my injured leg would let me. Behind me, I heard something large tear through the underbrush where I'd thrown the flashlight. It bought me a little time, but I knew it wasn't enough. I pushed forward, the pain in my left leg making each step feel like an eternity. I was ready to give up, ready to lie down and let whatever this thing was end it for me. But then I saw the trees break open ahead. It's a mockingbird, came the voice from behind me, spurring me to keep moving. Can we play some rave music after this? Came Maddie's voice, as if nothing was wrong. I get my taste from my dad, came not Rachel's voice, casual as could be. I'll be fast, Mark's voice echoed. We got a full moon, said not Martin, almost mockingly. Down here, my own voice cried out. I stumbled into the open field and, despite the agonizing pain, forced myself to run toward Mark's car. Each step was a scream of agony, and the voices behind me mimicked every one of them, making it sound like an entire crowd was chasing me. I reached the car, climbed into the driver's seat, and slammed the door shut, waiting for whatever was out there to catch up. It never did. I sat there, shivering and staring out into the woods, my mind racing. Hours passed in silence until, just before dawn, I heard a voice call out from the darkness. "There's a mockingbird singing," Jesse's voice said, followed by Maddie's voice saying, "Sounds exhausting." Then nothing. I sat there all night, watching as the sun slowly rose over the horizon. As the first light of day crept across the land, I saw an old car winding up the road. I jumped out, waving it down. The driver, an elderly man, let me use his phone to call the police and gave me a ride back to town. Later, the authorities claimed it was a bear attack that killed my friends. Their bodies were found mutilated in the woods, or what was left of them. They tried to tell me that I must have imagined everything, but I know what I saw. Still, I didn't press the issue, not wanting to end up in a mental hospital. I couldn't make things right from there. I miss Mark. I miss Martin. I miss Jesse, Rachel, and even Maddie, despite everything. Not a day goes by that I don't think about them and wonder what really killed them. Maybe that's why I'm here now. I'm parked outside the entrance to Mockingbird Wood. The sun is setting, and I'm as ready as I'll ever be. I have a shotgun filled with slugs resting on my lap, and I'm sending this off in case I don't make it back. When I was in the river, I told those things I was coming back with a gun, and I don't intend to break that promise. I hope they remember the sound of my screams as I ran for the car. I hope they remember how to make that sound again. And if they've forgotten, I'm going to remind them. I just moved into my first apartment, and honestly, I couldn't have been more excited. It wasn't much to look at, a rundown place in one of the sketchier parts of town, but it was mine. I'd gotten a killer deal on the rent, only $800 a month. Looking back, that probably should have been a red flag, but at the time, I was just so thankful to finally have a place to call my own. At that point, I was so broke I didn't need help moving. I had so few things, a truck wasn't even necessary, just the back seat of my car did the trick. By the end of that first day, I had my air mattress set up in my bedroom, the TV and Xbox sitting on the living room floor, and my most prized possession, my air fryer, sitting proudly on the kitchen counter. After covering the deposit and the first month's rent, I even had enough left for a 6-pack of beer. I kicked back on my air mattress, the only piece of furniture I had, cracked open a bottle of lager, and just soaked in the moment. It wasn't much, but honestly, it felt like paradise. After a couple of beers, I decided to hit the bathroom. While I was sitting there, I noticed some graffiti scratched into the wall. "Leave right now." It looked like someone had hastily carved it, like they were in a rush or something. I found it kind of amusing at first, but figured I'd just cover it up with some paint when I got paid next week. Now, when I think back to it, I can't help but wish I had just grabbed my stuff and bolted back to my parents' place. A few days passed, and I was still riding the high of living on my own. The message on the wall faded from my mind. I mean, why would I think about it? It was just some dumb graffiti in my cheap apartment. I hadn't even given it much attention, only vaguely noticing it while I was 2 beers in. That is, until the third day when I realized it wasn't the only message. Beneath the first one, there was another. "Get out now!" The next morning, I made a trip to the hardware store to pick up some plain white paint. There was this cute girl at the counter when I checked out, with black hair cut at her shoulders and these thick-rimmed glasses perched on her nose. "Hey there, how's it going today?" I asked, walking up with my can of spray paint. "Well, I'm here, so that's a good start," she replied with a grin. I glanced down at her name tag. "Caden, right?" "That's not fair," she said playfully. "I don't know your name, and mine is literally right here on my shirt." "It's Bryce," I said, even though she hadn't actually asked. So why the spray paint, Bryce? You some kind of street artist or something? She asked, raising an eyebrow. Nah, I just moved into a new place. I'm just fixing up some spots where people left notes on the walls. I tried to sound casual about it. After all, I'd never really had a place to bring a girl to before. She finished ringing me up and paused to grab a pen. With a smirk, she scribbled something on the back of my receipt. Make sure to let me know if you need anything else, she said. That's my number, by the way. As you can tell, I take my job super seriously. I couldn't help it. I grinned from ear to ear. I made my way back to my car, the smile practically glued to my face, and I kept it the whole drive home. When I got back inside, I slammed the door behind me, then realized I had forgotten the paint in the car. I was still floating from the fact that Kaden gave me her number, clearly lost in thought. I headed back to the door to grab the paint, but when I tried to open it, it wouldn't budge. I yanked on the handle a couple of times and then gave it a solid pull out of frustration. Finally, the door swung open, and I made a mental note to check the door frame later. A little while later, I was in the bathroom, spray painting over the weird messages on the wall with quick bursts of paint. Once I finished, I stepped back, proud of myself for handling it like an adult. That's when I noticed another message a little higher up on the wall. You're in danger. I laughed, and just covered it up with more paint. I don't take advice from walls, asshole, I muttered aloud, trying to brush it off. That was the last I thought about it that night. I tossed some chicken nuggets in the air fryer and cracked open a beer. I spent the rest of the evening texting Kaden, getting to know her better and doing my best to keep things cool and casual. I really wanted to ask her out right then and there, but I figured I should play it a little slow. Apparently, that strategy worked, because she asked if she could come over tomorrow night. When I saw that text, my face split into that same goofy grin I'd had when I drove home earlier. But that smile vanished when I went to the bathroom later and noticed a new message on the wall. You need to leave right now. The message was in the same spot where I had seen the first one, and at this point, I was starting to feel seriously unsettled. I checked every room in my apartment, half expecting to find someone hiding in there, but after thoroughly searching the place, I couldn't figure out how anyone could have snuck in. My apartment was so small and sparse, there just wasn't anywhere to hide. So, I ended up spraying over the message with paint again, trying to forget about it. But even after that, I had trouble sleeping that night, lying there listening for any sounds in the apartment. The next morning, I dragged myself into the bathroom and was relieved to find the wall clear of any more writing. I let out a sigh, thinking maybe I had just missed it before, or, if someone really did break in, they were long gone. From that point on, I made a mental note to double-check my door locks. Later that evening, Kaden came over. The first thing she did was crack a joke about how she loved my minimalist decor. I laughed at just about everything she said, enjoying her company while we drank beer and took hits from the bong she brought. I even dragged my air mattress into the living room so we could watch Night of the Living Dead together. When she told me it was one of her favorite movies, I thought, this is it. I should marry her. But I kept that thought to myself for now. Kaden excused herself to use the bathroom. When she came back out, she was laughing. You still haven't painted over the wall? I know you got the paint for it, she teased with a grin. What are you talking about? I painted it yesterday, I said, my confusion clearly showing. You must have done a really bad job then, she chuckled. She settled back down next to me, but I was already getting up. I didn't want her to see the worried look creeping onto my face as I walked into the bathroom to check for myself. And sure enough, the message was still there. This place is hell, you dipshit. Not only had the graffiti survived my 2 attempts to cover it, but now it was insulting me. I groaned and grabbed the spray can from under the sink, quickly covering the message and pushing down the panic that started to bubble up, like the smoke from Caden's bong. I told myself I'd deal with whatever this was later, especially since I had a beautiful girl hanging out with me on my cheap air mattress. The rest of the night went fine. Caden left around midnight, and I walked her to her car. We even shared a kiss before she drove off. But when I got back inside my apartment, I felt a little off, like I was being pulled in 2 directions by the evening's ambivalence. I walked into the bathroom and grabbed the spray can again. Even though the wall was clear now, I was so frustrated by the back and forth with the graffiti that I laid it on thick and painted over it again. I convinced myself there had to be a perfectly logical explanation for all of this. I was probably just overthinking it, and I was too dumb to figure it out. So, I decided not to stress about it, and fell asleep quickly. The next morning, as I was heading out the door for work, I peeked at the wall one last time. It was still empty. "Serves you right for calling me a dipshit," I muttered to the wall and walked out the door. But when I tried to leave, the door got stuck again. I had to plant my foot on the wall next to it and yank it free. I was starting to think that my $800 apartment might actually be a little crappy. But hey, it's the reason I met Caden, so I was willing to overlook a lot. I spent the day texting her, flirting, and feeling like I was on top of the world. We were already making plans to watch 28 Days Later next. If she kept loving zombie movies as much as I did, I wouldn't be able to help myself from proposing. I got home and figured I should clean up a bit before her next visit. I'd even buy a couple of folding chairs to give my air mattress a break. While I was mopping the floors, I went into the bathroom and nearly screamed. There, on the wall, was a new message. This one stretched across from one corner to the other in big, bold letters. "Get out and don't come back, Bryce." I painted over it again, my mind racing as I tried to figure out what the hell was going on. I emptied the entire can of spray paint this time, my heart pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. I stayed up all night, just staring at the wall, daring it to say something. By the time the first light of dawn touched the hallway outside, I felt completely drained. I knew I had to sleep, so I called into work and dragged my air mattress into the bathroom. I wasn't going to let whoever was doing this scare me out of my own place. I slept fitfully, waking up every couple of hours to check the wall. I kept thinking about the messages, wondering who could be sneaking in and writing them. Maybe it was the maintenance people, or someone with a spare key. Either way, I didn't care. Even if the apartment was haunted, I wasn't about to let that chase me away. Some dumb writing on the wall wasn't going to hurt me. When I woke up, the sun was already starting to set. I needed to grab the folding chairs from my car before Caden came over. I glanced at the wall again before moving my air mattress back into the bedroom. No new messages. I headed for the front door, but when I tried to open it, it was stuck again. I put my foot on the wall next to it and yanked. Still stuck. Frustrated, I kicked the door so hard it hurt my foot, then planted both feet on the wall, straining to rip the thing open. Finally, it gave way, sending me falling backward. I hit the floor so hard that the air got knocked out of me. I grabbed the folding chairs from my car and, as I was bringing them back inside, I started thinking that maybe I should start looking for a new place. It wouldn't be easy, but I could handle an extra couple $100 a month for rent. I just have to cut back on beer. I set up the chairs and then went to use the bathroom. I'd only been gone for a second, but when I came back, there was another message. "Last chance." I lost it. I screamed in rage and punched the wall. As soon as I did it, I cursed. There goes my security deposit. Caden arrived not long after, and we had a great time. I made taquitos in my air fryer, cracked open a couple beers, and we barely even watched the movie. We were making out so intensely that I fell off the folding chair. She laughed and followed me to the floor. It was the best night I'd ever had. I walked her to her car, kissed her goodbye, and then went back inside. It was late, and the apartment was quiet. I went straight to the bathroom to check again, and I couldn't believe what I saw. There were no new messages. No hole in the wall either. Just a plain, smooth surface. I reached out and felt the spot where the hole should have been, and it felt completely normal, like nothing had ever been there. That's when I made my decision. I was leaving. I started piling up all my stuff by the front door, which wasn't much. I did one last sweep through the apartment, making sure I hadn't forgotten anything, and when I got to my bedroom, I stopped. It was the only room with a window. I stood there, staring at the bright sunlight pouring through the window, even though it should have been the middle of the night. That's when panic hit, and I bolted for the front door. But when I got there, all my things were gone. The apartment looked exactly like it did when I first moved in. I tried to force the door open, but not only was it stuck, the knob wouldn't even turn. I screamed in terror and ran to the bedroom, kicking at the window as hard as I could. Not only didn't it break, but it didn't even shake or make a sound when I hit it again and again. I pulled out my phone, desperately trying to call 911, but all I got was the busy signal. By this point, I was in full panic mode when I heard the front door unlock. When it creaked open, what I saw only made my anxiety worse. It was me, moving into the apartment with all my stuff. I screamed, I yelled, I even tried to grab myself, anything to get my attention, but my hands just passed right through me. I watched as I unpacked everything into the apartment. I even tried to rush out the door as the other me opened it, only to slam into an invisible wall, hitting it hard enough to bruise my shoulder. Anger took over, and I started pounding my fists against the wall. That's when I realized I could still touch things in the apartment. I started scraping at the paint, and I noticed it flaked off easily. In my desperation, I scratched the words, "Leave right now," into the wall. I watched this all happen, knowing the messages I left would be ignored. The bathroom wall was the only one I could scrape, so I kept doing it, hoping to make a difference. Every time I watched myself paint over the words, I cried harder, feeling more and more helpless. I thought this might be where I would die, but somehow, it never happened. Eventually, I watched myself punch a hole in the wall. After that, I just walked into the living room, slumped against the door, and sobbed, my whole body shaking with the release. I saw Kaden come over and leave, then I watched as I started putting all my stuff by the door. I kept my face buried in my arms for what felt like forever, missing my mom and dad, missing Kaden, hell, even missing my stupid air fryer. I know it sounds odd, but if you've ever owned one, you get it. Eventually, exhaustion took over, and I cried myself to sleep. When I woke up, I felt a cool breeze on my face and saw that the front door was wide open. Hesitant, I reached out, expecting the invisible wall to stop me like it had before. But this time, I fell through, my hand scraping against the concrete as I passed through freely. I looked back in disbelief, making sure I was really outside. Slowly, I got to my feet, then ran inside to start moving my stuff into my car. As I loaded the last of it up, I slammed the doors shut one last time and got into my car. A grin spread across my face as I turned the key in the ignition. I spent that night at my parents' house, and after a couple of days, I found a new place. It's a little nicer, and I'm pretty sure it won't suck me into some hellish vortex. It's a few hundred more a month than the last one, but I think that's a price worth paying. It's been a month since all that happened, and I still haven't told anyone. I drove by the old place last week and saw a young guy moving in. I almost said something, but then realized I'd probably come off like a crazy person, so I just drove away. Tonight, Caden and I are watching The Shining. I've already got chicken strips in the air fryer, and a 6-pack chilling in the fridge. Life's good here. But if I see even a single letter on the wall in this place, I swear to God, I'm burning it to the fucking ground.